Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Crypto News podcast. We are buzzing as always, coming in hot from Mexico. It's good to be back. Had to get out of the cold in Toronto. It's already freezing. A couple days ago, I went for a morning run and I could see my breath. No bueno. That's when it's time to get out of there. Can't do it. But folks, time for our guest today. Super pumped to make this happen, but trying to get him on for a hot minute. Today we have Azeem Khan on the show today, co-founder and COO of the one and only Morph, an EVM Layer 2 blockchain focused on user-friendly options for developers to create finance, gaming, social media, and entertainment apps. Azeem aims to broaden the global exposure of Web3 projects through the building of critical relationships with deals with NGOs, governments, and for-profit companies. This is super cool as well. He is also a consultant to the UNICEF Crypto Fund. Folks, before this show, I didn't even know there was a UNICEF Crypto Fund. UNICEF is one of the biggest NPOs in the world. You guys always know them when you're a kid, whether it was in school, whether it was the TV commercials, and now there's the UNICEF Crypto Fund. So friggin' cool. He also will be working with the Mercy Corp to raise funds and resources for distribution in Gaza, which I absolutely love. Previously, he was the head of impact at Gitcoin, where he played a pivotal role in the adoption of quadratic funding to benefit organizations, including UNICEF and the American Cancer Society. Azeem's efforts at Gitcoin resulted in contributions of over 60 million in grants to the company and over 29 billion, holy shit, in global financial impact. Guy might have the nicest hair in all of Web3 in Canada. We call that flow. I'm so jealous of his flow. Azeem, welcome to the show, my friend. Pumped to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me, bro. This has already been a great conversation before we started recording, so I'm super excited to just chat about whatever it is we get to today.
Super pumped. Look, we got to start with the hair. And for the listeners, you guys got to check this in. I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked at his thumbnail yet. I don't know what the thumbnail is going to look like if you are just listening and not watching. But dude, when are you going to get a brand deal? Like when is Pantene or like Head and Shoulders going to sponsor you? What's going on there?
Bro, I am waiting. You know what's crazy is I did not know I even had curly hair when I started growing my hair out. I had buzzed my head in January of 2020. And it was just like, I've always had short hair my whole life. And then COVID happened. And so I couldn't go to a barber. I'm someone who like is at the barber, like right now, like to get my beard lined up and my neck done, I'm literally at the barber once a week. I go every single Saturday morning at 9 a.m. And COVID happened and I couldn't go to the barber anymore to get my hair cut. And enough months passed when there was no barbershops open that when barbershops opened again, I was like, you know what? I've never had long hair. Like, let's just keep it going. Yeah. And I was resistant to it at first. But the idea that the whole world was shut down, and so I didn't have to worry about that middle awkward phase, where I just throwing a hat. It was like I didn't have to meet with people in person. You just like throwing a hat. You're on a video call, and you're just like, okay, cool, let it grow. And I never expected to like it. The most interesting thing I have found about it, and is totally outside the realm of crypto stuff, is that it changes the perception of how people treat you, and so. Like when you're a dude with long hair, it's going against like the cultural norm that most men have short hair. And so you're treated in a way where you're more laid back and you're more chill and you're just vibes, right? And then what sort of happens is that it's that quote, I am what I think you think I am. And so you almost like I've noticed myself become more of the like chill, laid back person as a result of like being treated that way, right? Like as opposed to like before I had like what would be like a great cut on Wall Street. And so you're treated with like that sharpness. Whereas with the long hair, exactly how our convo started, the like very appreciative comments you made is just like one of the biggest reasons I appreciate it is exactly that is I've found that it creates an aura of chillness from me that then people bring me that like positive vibe as a whole. And so it's one of my favorite things about having long hair is literally, I'm just like, oh, like it creates more positivity in my life.
That's so cool. I mean, I got curly hair like you as well. I assume you're a hairy dude. I'm a hairy dude like you as well. Probably I Middle Eastern blood. I got Lebanese blood in me. Yes. You know.
Okay.
Very,
yeah. 100%. My family's from Pakistan. Same thing.
Exactly.
And so it's like, So it's like the thick curly hair thing. I just didn't know. Like when I started growing it, my sister was like, wait, you have curly hair. And I was like, shit, you're right. I do, you know?
I love it. Well, look, this isn't this was an electric start, but again, this isn't a beauty pod. We'll get into the fun stuff here. After reading your bio, and again, of course, we're gonna get into Morph, which is super cool and I absolutely love. But before that, you seem to, a lot of people talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. Oh, I'm pro charity, I'm pro NGOs, I donate, blah blah blah. You literally have raised millions and millions of dollars and you are in the weeds for all this kind of stuff. Have you always been like this since you were a kid? And then just sort of, if you could walk me through, like, what does your passion come from in regards to your love and actually want to move the needle for NGOs and the betterment of the world?
Bro, I did not grow up wealthy. We grew up in a rough neighborhood, my siblings and I, in Jersey City. I don't like, I'm not going to say that we grew up in like the worst conditions possible, but it wasn't anything where we were doing exceptionally well my whole life. And then I mentioned my parents were moved here from Pakistan. I'm child of immigrants, and when we were younger, we would go back and we would go spend time during the summer visiting our family and seeing what was going on. And so my whole life, I've just sort of seen the realities of how so many people around the world end up living. And I wasn't really aware of how much it impacted me. And just over time, like getting into like crypto, I got in, it was like 2012, I started looking into it. 2013, I wrote an article for the Huffington Post about the New York City Bitcoin Center. And a lot of my interest stemmed from looking at, the idea of decentralized money and monetary theory and how we give value to currency, like all these like very abstract ideas. But I started thinking about all the ways that it could really benefit so many people around the world. And I was very fortunate to get a role at Gitcoin. I started there early 2022. And initially, my role was to just raise money for a grants program they had. Many of the most successful companies in Ethereum were grantees of Gitcoin at one point. So Uniswap launched their Unichain today, like Uniswap and Yearn and Optimism and Gnosis and Bankless and Wallet Connect and POAP. Like there's so many, 1inch. And so it was amazing to be able to just be part of that, to see, learning to meet the protocols that were willing to give money, the high net worth individuals, the venture funds, the exchanges, and sort of trying to take that amalgamation of relationships and seeing that a lot of the work that we were doing in terms of me raising this money was actually doing good. And I was able to speak to early stage builders, and then I was able to speak to builders who had graduated from things and had gone on to raise money and launch tokens and be very successful. And so the idea that we were doing work that was helpful was just like honestly very cool. And the ability to do a deal with UNICEF sort of came across the table while I was at Gitcoin. And because I'd been doing well, they asked me to lead the deal. So from start to finish, took that deal. We did a very, very cool grants round at the end of 2022. And it just sort of like built on top of itself, right? We're this outside of crypto, and even within crypto, this relatively unknown DAO that ends up announcing a partnership with UNICEF. And I just loved what they were doing. I still love what they're doing. And so a lot of it just comes down to, hey, I'm very much so crypto native in the field every single day, meeting with all the right people. I know what's going on. And so it was just a situation where I talked with them and I was like, I would love to be able to assist you guys, because if people like myself don't find ways to cross over and be able to work with you on whichever initiatives you're looking to, for them to figure something out might take 20 hours of research for something that like both of us would be able to just, I saw that on Twitter today. And so it really just started like that. And once we announced that deal with UNICEF while I was at Gitcoin, it led to so much inbound, right? So we had the IMF reach out, the World Bank reach out, the American Cancer Society reach out, Change.org reach out, the World Wildlife Fund. Like,
Azeem, this was inbound. This wasn't even outbound.
This was all. Yeah, this was after.
I love that shit. I love that.
Yeah.
Shit.
So it was like after Gitcoin UNICEF announced, I think all these major programs around the world were just sort of like, what is this Gitcoin thing? And so they started reaching out. I've always been intentional about keeping a presence on LinkedIn for the last couple of years. And so I started just having a lot of convos, and that led to a deal that took from January of 2023 until November of 2023, working with the American Cancer Society and being able to do a deal where we were talking about how do we use this to decentralize cancer research funding. And even among that, it was a much less popular deal, but Gitcoin did a deal with Shell Oil. And
Wow.
yeah, it was fascinating. We got them to give us $500,000 that we were distributing during grants rounds to people working on Web3 climate initiatives to make the world better. And so, honestly, while it was already something that was something I cared about just because of the way I grew up, I won't pretend like I went out, I knew what I was doing. It was a lot of it was just I was doing the work and it just sort of happened to work out. I enjoyed the way it made
The
me
puzzles
feel.
go into place. It's always like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no
Yeah.
roadmap.
Mercy Corps was similar. Like, they'd come across the work. We had a conversation, and I was like, what are some of the ways that I can assist? And that's just sort of how it's always been. It's me wanting to make the time to be able to do those kinds of things. I'm not personally crypto wealthy. I still have student loans. I drive a used Lexus, which is a very nice Lexus, but like I drive a used Lexus, right?
Yep.
I have a mortgage. I don't own any like insane watches. And so for me, it's been, and I hope and believe that I can achieve, massive financial success at some point. But a big thing I've seen in this industry is that people are willing to cash in their integrity for money, and they're willing to do it
Yes.
very early and for what I consider to
Yes.
be way too cheap, because you only get one reputation. And there's this constant fight for attention in this space, and people are always willing to take attention in exchange for reputation. And that's not one of the things I'm willing to do. For me is, how do we actually use this technology to try to make the world a better place in some capacity, right? Otherwise, we're just proving everyone right who hates this industry. And for the most part, I'm one of the very vocal critics of crypto within crypto, because I find if we're not willing to self police bad actors and bad behavior, then we have no right to be upset when others get upset at us for not doing it and being like, well, this is just an industry of scammers. And if they don't see people within the industry being outraged when things happen. So I go out of my way. When I was within DAOs, I was writing articles about why DAOs suck. And not to say that they fully suck, but hey, like,
Yeah.
if you're someone who's looking to be able to do maternity leave while working in a DAO, that's not going to be very easy. You don't
Yeah.
get any benefits working in a DAO. You don't get the same legal protections working in a DAO. Your taxes are way more complicated working in a DAO. And so while so many people want to talk about the benefits, I'm always like, well, let's take it back and let's have a more sober conversation. And so I think it's part of where my desire to do things that help benefit the world, whether it's like helping out with UNICEF, and I'm by no means some massive player there. We work together a couple hours a month, and I find ways that I can assist them, like make introductions, like help drive some conversations. And I sort of look to do it wherever I can. In seeing the whole point of this, at least for when I started reading about it and got into it, was how do we use this to help create a better world? And I'm a really big believer in the fact that you can do good and you can do well, like do well financially. And I don't understand why people don't see it that way. I think you can simultaneously achieve both. And that's what I'm hoping to. And perhaps it means things move a little bit more slowly, but like that's okay with me.
Well said. Wow, what a start to the show, dude. Another thing I love, and again, we'll get into more right after this, but another thing I love about the crypto-based donations and crypto working with NGOs, so on and so forth, is the easeability. Because like, let's say you want to send US dollars to an incredible charity in, I don't know, Thailand or somewhere in Africa. Like, that's a shit show. If they have a Bitcoin address or an Ethereum address or a Solana address or insert any crypto address, it's 3 clicks.
Yes,
do your little
exactly
mock transaction, send $10 first just to make sure they get it. Once they get it, then you send the big mill. That is so much eeasier. I'm sure there's some regulatory shit shows included with that, but from an efficiency and friction perspective, unbeatable. There's not even a second best option.
I have wondered why and when it will be easier to send stable coins back to my family in Pakistan, because right now we use Western Union, and Western Union is a terrible company when it comes to being able to profit
15
off.
ticks?
Yeah,
15 ticks?
Yeah, something like that. The amount that they're able to profit off people who need it so much is crazy to me. And so for me, the ability to be able to do stuff like this and work on what it looks like to make remittances easier, or to help build global economies where traditional banking systems don't exist. And again, it goes back to, I think that it's actually an article that I'll be writing for CoinDesk very soon. Is I think that this idea of being able to do things where we help benefit those around the world is seen as this moral argument. Oh, let's onboard the global south because of moral reasons. And I'm like, "Well, this isn't a moral reason. There's a complete economic reason. If you can onboard tens of million or hundreds of millions of users into the global financial system where they're using credit and lending markets and they have interest bearing accounts and they're able to make investments or they're able to protect themselves against inflation by, swapping over to stable coins, this is an economic argument to be made. It's perhaps you're looking at less transaction volume per person, but overall transaction volume as a whole is going to be way bigger. And so if you can have a bunch of small slices of the pie, it adds up to a lot of money. I mean, Walmart has like the 10 of in the top 10 richest people. I think 4 people are from the Walton family or something like that, right? So, Walmart's way of doing business is do volume and make a tiny cut of money on every single thing. And so it's just something that I haven't really seen executed or at least talked about as much when it comes to crypto. And, going into Morph a little bit, that's a lot of the philosophy we've been looking at is that there's actually a lot to accomplish in this space, but it requires being able and willing to go to places where the rest of the industry generally isn't at the moment.
Well said. Hey, you just gave me the biggest layup of all time. That's actually more like an alley-oop, not even a layup, an alley-oop. Full court alley-oop there, LeBron to D-Wade. Walk me through Morph. Like, I guess we'll do a quick segue of you leaving Git and starting Morph. Why the need to create another fully permissionless L2? Obviously, you guys are doing incredible work. It's an incredible piece of tech. But why? What was sort of that aha moment? Or what was that tipping point? Like, shit, we got to make this thing.
So honestly, we are incubated originally by an exchange out of Singapore named BitGet, and this was a project they had internally been working on for 8 or 9 months and when they actually started speaking to me about it. And the difference with how they wanted to go about rolling it out, though, as opposed to some of the centralized exchanges who have their own L2s, is they said, look, we believe in decentralization. We have a lot of resources. We've been funneling them into building this out. And we want to launch this, but we want this to launch in a way that will also be able to have its own actual founders and owners and be able to go out and raise outside capital and be able to do all of these things. And so super honestly, when the opportunity was presented to me in that way, it was sort of in a weird way, like a best of both worlds. And I was very fortunate at Gitcoin because the notoriety that it helped provide being a face and doing these like big deals
100%.
And raising all this money and meeting all of the best people in the ecosystem. It was sort of like being in public office almost, right? And I would get opportunities quite often where it was, come to this DeFi protocol or come to this L2 or whichever it was. But when I really sat with what the potential was to create a narrative and go about successfully launching it with Morph, it just made sense. And why that is to me is that if you really think about of the 200 L2s, right, where we're just one of those 200 L2s at this moment, the biggest thing I've seen is to successfully launch a chain, there's 2 main things that you need to be able to do. The first one is you need to be able to get TVL, users, liquidity, transactions, like all of those terms.
The classic.
After that,
the classic checklist.
Right? And then after that, you think about how do you get builders on, because you need to be able to successfully have enough liquidity to launch a token that does well, and then you have market making and treasury management, and then you set up a grant system and you try to get builders on board. And I said, well, working with BitGet puts us in this interesting position because between BitGet and BitGet Wallet, they have 40 million plus users. And so if we're in a position where they're incentivized to be able to help drivers, users to us, a lot of that initial distribution problem is not to say solved, but we have
you're right though. That's one of that's the toughest part is fun. Yeah. It's going to market. Yeah,
exactly. So we have a go to market where we have working hypotheses of how we can use the exchange, how we can use the wallet and other companies that they have within them and other resources as a whole. And so we can focus way more directly on the builders. And, having spent time at Gitcoin and meeting with grantees who had raised $200 and then had raised a ton of money and went out to, launch 1inch. And then being able to really see, part of the thing that we were doing there was we had two separate protocols for grants. And so my job was to know all of the Alt L1s and to know all of the L2s and to understand, what are you doing for ecosystem development? What are you doing for grants management? Because we have this software that we think will help you do it better. And I got a chance to really deeply understand all of the best and worst practices that chains in the ecosystem were exploring to be able to build out what they were doing. And so that was another place where I was like, oh, okay, cool. I can actually take cherry picking what are the best practices of each of the places and put together a working hypothesis on how I'd want to go about launching a chain of my own. And I came to this idea where I realized, if you really sit and think about it, to successfully launch a D app on top of an L2, everyone really focuses on launching infra. But if you're thinking about launching a successful D app, or a social media, a GameFi, whatever it is, what you're really looking to do is, first you need to find a blockchain to build on. Once you're able to sift through of the 200 places you can build, then you go to, okay, cool, we have an idea. We're a group of builders. We want to build on this. That's the second part of it. And traditionally, what's happened in this space is that at that second part, you go to the blockchain you've chosen or that you have a relationship with, and then you get a grant from them. Maybe it's 50K, maybe it's 100K, 125K. It's never $1 million or $2 million or $5 million, though. It's enough to be able to create proof of concept. It's enough to be able to pay everyone in the early stages of getting a minimum viable product going. And what's happened is that we have left builders in that position where they get given some initial grant money. And I saw this and I talked to so many builders. But after they got that grant money, there was no other support. But if you're really looking to successfully launch a company, what you need next is, once you've done your proof of concept and you have an MVP and you've got some users and you have some traction, you need to raise venture capital. But the problem we have in this space that I don't think many people have yet really identified is that within Web 2, if you were looking to launch a company, for the most part, everyone thought, okay, your main goal, regardless of how easy or how difficult it is to move to San Francisco. Get a job working at a FANG or work at a coffee shop, no matter what you're doing. You have your day job, you work on your startup on the side, and you take as many coffee meetings as you can within the small Bay Area to get enough warm introductions that at some point you raise money for your company, and then you get into YC, and then you go successfully, go about doing what you are. In a completely decentralized world of Web3, we don't have that place. New York, in ways, is...
There's no playbook. Right?
There's
100%.
no playbook. There's no place you go. There's no thing that you do. There's been a lot of successes, but they're not really replicable case studies. Whereas you could take a look at how founders from I think YC started in 03 or 04, where Twitch was part of it and Reddit was part of their first batch. And you can take a look at a playbook that's been followed over decades, and you can try to replicate that. It doesn't exist in Web3. And so I said, well, if you're a builder who then builds an MVP and you can't raise venture capital, and then what you're supposed to do next is you're supposed to be able to successfully launch a token. And that means being able to speak to exchanges, understand how that process works, get your token listed so that you can successfully launch a token, as opposed to go to Uniswap and launch an IDO and do it unsuccessfully and sort of have a bad token forever. So I said, what does it look like? And then there's media and there's influencers. There's all these things that are needed to be able to do this successfully. What if we tried bringing them under one roof? Because we have the ability to, and because we're not tied to, the exchange in the way where the exchange is L2, is we're agnostic. We raised outside capital. We have other exchanges in our round. We've been chatting with other exchanges outside of that. Why don't we put together something that's very much by the builder and for the builder, where we say, look, you should come build with us because the tech stack is good. I'm not a technical person who would be able to tell you about, our fraud proofs and things like that in detail. What I can tell you, though, and what I can tell builders is, we're the place that you want to come to build because we actually want to see you succeed. And how we're looking to do that is to consolidate the resources that you would need, from working with accelerators to having venture funds that are willing to look at your deals. We actually announced a centralized exchange alliance recently, where there was 5 exchanges on there. And so when you're ready to launch a token, there's going to be multiple exchanges willing to look at what you're doing that we're going to be able to route you to help successfully launch that token. And we're putting together venture funds that are very willing and able to look at deal flow that come into the Morph ecosystem that they would potentially invest in deals. And so what I want to be able to tell these builders is you just do what you are good at, right? You focus on the building side. Let me bring you everything else that you would need to create success for yourself so that 1 year after mainnet, 2 years after mainnet, 5 years after mainnet, we're able to say, look at how many companies were able to successfully launch on top of Morph and got the resources they needed to succeed. So instead of me having to figure out how to get the biggest DJ or rapper to parties to try to tell ourselves at every conference that we're doing what we need to onboard users, we just have actual developers who go out and go, yo, I'm successful because of Morph. They brought me everything I needed. You know, I'm just a dude from Ghana. I'm a dude from Buenos Aires. I'm a dude or a woman from Vietnam. I created a successful company because Morph put together those resources. And in so many ways, that's really the core tenets of why I believe in what we're doing at Morph is simply that, is we're bringing together all of the resources that I just have not seen brought together so that developers can focus on what they're good at doing. And then people like myself can focus on what I'm good at doing, which is how do I bring together and funnel those resources that you need so that you can do the things I can't. Like I can't develop software and I won't pretend that I know how to develop software, but I know how difficult it is to speak to exchanges, to try to get tokens listed, right? And so that's sort of the core thesis behind why another L2 and how we think that we're going to be able to differentiate ourselves in the market.
So you guys, obviously the tech's incredible, and we'll get into that later, but you guys let the builders build and you guys take care of all the nuanced nonsense stuff, the distribution, the go-to-market. I absolutely love that. Azeem, you're on a roll. We will continue, but we do need to give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show, Prime XBT. And when we get back, we will keep buzzing on everything Morph and the killer crypto consumer app, which I know that you guys would love to be built on Morph. But until then, huge shout out to Prime XBT, longtime friends and longtime sponsors of the Crypto News podcast. We love Prime XBT as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet. You can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is also running an exclusive promo for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. Use the promo code CryptoNews50. Again, that is CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. And now back to the show with Azeem. Azeem, I'd love to get into the killer crypto consumer app. Morph enables developers to do this with you guys, and your brilliance in regards to GTM and distribution allows this to happen as well. I could be wrong here, but one of the pillars of Morph is to create an ecosystem where consumer-friendly blockchain solutions can flourish. Mm-hmm. I am a big believer that we have still, the big sort of killer app right now is meme coins, which part of me loves and part of me doesn't love, but it's still not, there's still not really that one app. Like there's no singular vehicle for meme coins. You still need to go to a centralized exchange to onboard funds and then send that to your Phantom wallet and then go on Dex Screener and use Phantom and Jupiter and blah, blah, blah. It's an absolute nightmare. It is nightmare fuel in the purest of the word. What do you think will be the crypto consumer app?
Oof. I think meme coins are not a retail app. I think meme coins are just another speculative trading platform, trading idea that people have brought about. I have a lot of respect for the Pumped Out Fund team who have created a product that a lot of people want to use. Right.
Likewise.
But I think that there's been negative effects that have come about because it sort of the way that there was ICOs in 2017 and the way that there was NFTs in 2021. It's just, it's very similar in that it's a bubble, gambling. Right? Yeah, it's gambling. And I wrote about it earlier this year where I think that we need to move away from only having gambling be seen as a consumer application. For me, I honestly think we actually have a consumer application in stablecoins. I think it's not really labeled as such, but it's what we were talking about earlier, right? It's a very there's certain steps that need to be taken to make it easier. And I think a lot of that stuff honestly falls on regulatory. Is how do we
Agreed.
make it so that governments come together to be able to pass legislation on a country by country basis that understands these things so that we can get to the place of normalizing the use of them the same way we do credit cards, or within the US Venmo and
Yep.
Chase QuickPay. So I do think we've actually already found what is likely the real consumer application in stablecoins, the first massive consumer application. I think the reality, though, for some of the things that people are looking at when they're saying, when are we going to get gaming on blockchain? When are we going to get social media on blockchain? Is that, and this is one of the arguments a lot of people have, is when are we going to stop funding more infra? But I think the reality is that the infra still needs to be funded, because it's still very clear that, if 1 million people, or let's say if everyone who plays Call of Duty decided to play a blockchain game tomorrow, it would break whichever blockchain it was.
Snap it in 20 pieces.
Exactly. Right? Like it would literally break it. And so when I think about consumer, and when I think about this industry, I think about it in a much longer timeline. I think we're in a place where massive financial institutions in the last few years, like a BlackRock and a JP Morgan, went from saying that Bitcoin and all of cryptocurrency is a complete scam to every single one of them having a crypto team, some of them having money market funds, having their own Bitcoin ETFs, all of those things, the Ethereum ETF, the murmurs around a Solana ETF, is that actual adoption takes real time. And a lot of the applications people are looking to have used are going to take longer, is my honest opinion. But I think the thing that's actually making the lag happen is that they're not getting the resources, right? Where if you're a builder at the moment, are you really incentivized to do all this really hard stuff where you have to first pick the chain that you want to build on? And then you take this difficult idea and you start trying to do it. And you don't know how to get media. You don't know how to get influencers talking about it. You don't know how to raise venture capital. You don't know how to hire a decentralized team. There's so many difficult things that I think the friction of having to figure out what it takes to successfully launch a regular company creates alignment to just make more gambling. It creates alignment to be a scammer. It creates alignment to do rug pulls. It creates alignment to be a hacker. It creates alignment to go out and just raise as much grant money as you can from 10 different blockchains, where you maximize that, because you go, look, I'm never going to raise money, but I might as well make as much money as I can as an anon or a pseudo anon by going to every chain and saying, here's this innovative idea I have, not have exclusivity on it. But I think that those are incentives that have not intentionally been set up, but have unintentionally been set up by all of the blockchains. That, if you're a builder, this is what makes the most logical sense to do. And so if that's the case, then that means that we're in a position where the people who would potentially build, even if it's a simple Flappy Birds version of a mobile game or a web app game that's built on blockchain, people aren't going to build those things because they realize that they're never going to be able to raise money and monetize those things. Instead, they should do the things that they're incentivized to do so. So I actually think a big part of why we're not seeing the consumer applications start in the ways that people think is because the incentive is not there to actually build them. There's principles and morals of feeling like you're doing the right thing, but if you're looking to pay your bills, it's not.
100%.
And so, so my hope is that actually what we're doing at Morph actually gets replicated. I've written about a lot of this stuff in long form on CoinDesk. I'm a columnist there. And every 2 weeks I submit an article. And I've been talking about how to build blockchain ecosystems, how we need to be able to turn VC tokens and treat them more like more sophisticated assets. I've written about how to raise venture funding and sort of just talking about my journey and my thoughts and everything that I'm seeing, because I don't think that this industry succeeds by Morph being the only one who's looking to pool resources together. I don't think that Morph will be the only blockchain where success happens. I think that I'm not someone who's anti-Solana at all. I think some of the things that Solana has done is amazing. I've been noticing some of the stuff that Aptos and Sui are doing. I know people on both teams. I think it's great what they're working on. I like the Say team a lot. And other non-EVM teams. And I think that a lot of the Ethereum community at least gets stuck in this battle of moralistic arguments about EVM is better because of this, and that. And to me, I think that it's just about being able to have the best teams offer the best resources to the best builders. So we create adoption. There's Abstract Chain, which is also focusing on consumer applications, and many would argue is a core competitor of ours. But candidly, I love the Abstract team, and I met with Luca.
I love that. I love your sentiment on this. We gotta get to the finish line together. It's like,
yeah, that's exactly it, man. It's like, I don't like zero sum games. I think that I talked about this when we were in Singapore. We had something called Consumer Day for Morph, and I had a small keynote about this. And the way I phrased it was, at the moment, everyone's sort of trying to get their slice of the pie. But the way that I see it is that you can actually just get the ingredients together and make more pie. Because we have like a sliver of people in this world that are actually using blockchain. Let's just bring more of them in. Let's make the size of the pie bigger. So even if you keep a small slice of the pie, it's actually a very valuable slice. And so, I met Luca of Pudgy on a panel that we did at Consumer Day. The dude is so insightful. I loved hearing the things that he had to say. And this is coming from what was supposed to be his competitor. Or we had Smokey from Barachain on there. That dude is so eloquent. And for all of the shit that Barachain catches online about how they go about marketing, I was sitting there listening going, I totally understand why this guy raised $100 million plus, right? And so to me, it steps away from this idea that like success means I have to win and everyone else has to lose. And what I'm hoping to see is the industry just sort of develop. The way that I think that it ends up happening is, you said you're technically from Toronto, you live all over the world. I have no idea what cell phone service you use, but I'm in New York. I have Verizon. When I go to the UK, I use Vodafone. If I went to Nigeria, I'd be using MTN. So I think what's probably going to happen is going to be similar to how different countries and different regions use different telecom companies.
Great analogy.
Right? I think that's sort of just what's going to happen is that there's going to be blockchains and then consumer applications that take off in different countries or regions of the world. And then it'll just sort of be that. Where in the US, I'm like, oh, there's Verizon, there's Sprint, there's T-Mobile, and there's AT&T. And so, later there in Toronto, it might be the same as the ones in the US, but if you go to Berlin, it'll be 3 different blockchains that people sort of use because it wouldn't make sense to use Verizon in Berlin. It's sort of how I see this playing out. I don't actually see it being like one monopoly company for a blockchain who runs the world. It just doesn't make sense. And so, if anything, I'm like, welcome everybody. Like, let's get everyone involved and see what we can actually build with this.
Azeem, geez, what an episode, dude. Also, what an analogy to end the show. Holy crap. I love a good analogy too. That got me going there. That got me going. Honestly, dude, incredible episode. Really appreciate you coming on. Before you go, any news, and mind you, this is going to air a week today on the 17th of October. Any news popping off for Morph, give or take around that time frame?
We're going to mainnet soon. We announced the road to mainnet the other day, and so mainnet is coming up very soon. I would say, just get in touch more than anything. I'm constantly, despite how busy I am, focusing on really actually making time to speak to individual builders, because I think that you have to do things that don't scale in order to scale. And so focusing on being able to meet with builders and see how we can find those applications that will be successful on Morph after we go to mainnet and beyond.
I love it. And before you let us go, my friend, can you please let our listeners know where they can find, of course, you personally and Morph online and on socials?
I am AZEEMK_ on Twitter. My DMs are open. And Morph is just Morph L2 on every platform, I think. I'm also on Discord at AzeemK. I'm generally, actually, I respond to everything. And so I'd love to have people reach out. Anyone who's interested, please do. Years ago, I've always been someone who cares a lot about doing cold reach outs. It was a little over a decade ago, I reached out to Mark Cuban, former owner of the Dallas Mavericks, and asked him if he'd be willing to do an interview with me for the Huffington Post. And Mark Cuban responded within 15 minutes and said he would absolutely be willing to do an interview. CC'd his assistant, and we set up a time to be able to do that interview. And I'll never forget that if someone who is a multi-billionaire and at the time was the owner of a sports franchise and part of a successful television show could find the time to respond to me and in an intentional way actually make time for me, there's no reason that I can't do the same.
I love that. Good stuff, man. What an epi. Really appreciate you coming on. Once you guys go live, which is going to be very soon, but after you guys go live with Mainnet, can't wait to have you on for round 2. But this was an incredible episode. Really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully I can meet you in New York or Toronto very shortly. And when I get you that Head and Shoulders brand deal, throw me over a little piece of the pie and we'll go from there.
I got you, bro.
Appreciate it. Folks, what an episode with Azeem Khan, co-founder and COO of Morph. Honestly, just a wild episode, folks. I don't think we've had one like this ever. And we're 370 epis deep. So huge shout out to Azeem for coming on and dropping knowledge bombs left, right, and center. Huge shout out to his team as well. And of course, my team for making this happen. If you guys enjoyed this one, I hope you did. Please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team and I. Speaking of the team, love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. Would not be here without you. Especially you, Stas. You are the GOAT. I love you and you know it. And back to the listeners, love you guys. Keep on growing those bags, keep on printing money, and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Bye for now. Love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Ciao.